welcome back to the Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity. We do this live every Thursday, 12 to 1 p.m. On Talkradio.nyc, for those of you who are listening live. So, Jana, before you started the walk on the Camino, did you have a particular intention that you went there with?
No, not very well.
Okay.
So I had actually read a book about someone who had walked the Camino and they'd done it very intentionally. She was a nun and she walked with a priest, and they had a prayer and they said the prayer every day. And so I was like, gosh, if I'm doing this, I should have, a good intention for this. And so it became a should. And I spoke to a friend, and we talked about it for a while. And what I realized was it was just go and have an adventure and see what shows up. And so I didn't have, and some people had very clear intentions. We had people who were grieving, they'd had a child who died, or some people who had done something really egregious and wanted forgiveness, and it's known for forgiveness. He's the patron saint of forgiveness, so a lot of people work. So there were some people who had very specific things that they were walking for, and but mine was just. But I did learn about intention, from the power of it, from walking it, so did you develop an intention during it, or did you develop many intentions while doing it? Well, yes, I did. I guess I did develop an intention out of crisis. So, by the time we were about 10 days in, I developed shin splints. So it was very painful. Like every step felt like I was standing like on a broken bone, and so I went to a physical therapist, and she just looked and she said, "You're not going to be able to keep walking." She said, "If you keep walking, you're going to break your bone. You cannot keep doing this." And so I went and had dinner with my daughter, and I sat down and I was like, "Can I cry?" And she's like, "Could you wait till we leave the restaurant?" I was like, "I don't think so." So I just started crying, and then I just, I could really see my personality coming up, because my personality is perseverance and just muscle through things and just, move through and get things done. And I sat there and I just said, I don't want to give up. I don't want to give in. And my daughter was like, "I don't care. We can fly home. We can go sit on a beach, And I was just really struggling with I don't want to quit. And my daughter said something that was really wise, which was, quitting is when you stop doing something and you choose to do that. And she said, it's not quitting when you can't do something anymore. And she said, you cannot keep walking. And she also said, I refuse to keep walking with you. I did not sign up to walk across Spain watching you wince with each step. And I was just like, okay. And I had for a moment this flash of like, well, what if I don't wince? Like, will she be able to tell? And then luckily, I'm incredibly grateful. A friend of mine texted me and said, have you thought about renting bikes? And so we rented bikes for the next stage, which was dead flat. You couldn't actually do it the first stage or the last stage because it was too mountainous, but we were going through this really flat stage. And so for me, we were on the bikes, and I just had this moment of, and in the restaurant with my daughter, she said, look, we're not Catholic, we're not even Christian, I don't care about getting to Santiago, I just came with you because you asked me, like, I don't really care if we get there. And when we were riding the bikes, I just had this moment of, I don't care about getting there either. This is like an arbitrary point. Somebody said, get to Santiago. Like, somebody just made that up. And so I'm just going to do this beautifully. And that means treating myself beautifully. And that means enjoying the beauty of this place, but also walking it beautifully or journeying it beautifully. And I told that, I turned to my daughter and I said, I've kind of given up on, I don't mind if we don't get to Santiago, for a few days shy. It doesn't matter to me. And she turns and she looks, she's like, we're getting to Santiago. So there's the power of community.
Yeah. Beautiful. So like you mentioned before briefly, about, bringing sort of your experiences back home with you. So what did all of this kind of teach you that you've been able to bring home with you?
Lots of things. I mean, when I got home, I sat down and I wrote a list of the lessons that I had from the Camino. That's another thing that a lot of people say is there isn't the Camino, it's my Camino, because everybody has an entirely different experience.
Right.
Some people get injured, some people get sick, some people, walk in pouring rain. So, we all have an entirely different experience, and the conversations we have are all different. And so when I got back, I wrote the lessons from my Camino. And I think for me, the journey worked more deeply on me after I got home, which I didn't expect.
Really?
And a lot of people on the Camino are walking it to relieve themselves of grief. That's very common. And other people who are trying to find their purpose or why they're here on the earth. And when we were walking it, I was very clear that I know why I'm here. That's settled for me. I've done that. I've done that work. I've walked that journey, and so it gave me freedom to just enjoy the beauty and the companionship. And so when I got back, it was very unexpected for me, actually. I got back, and first a few days we were exhausted, which, that was totally to be expected. The exhaustion kicked in.
Yeah.
And, but I found myself crying at the drop of a hat. I'd be watching Grey's Anatomy and crying because someone's died. And this is not me. I don't usually do that. And it was just, I had an intense sense of disorientation. That I almost like I couldn't even see which way was up. It was just like a very disorienting space.
Interesting.
And I have a large 40-foot labyrinth in the back of my garden. And when I got back, I've had it there for 10 years. And when I got back, it had grown over for the first time. And so I was like, well, that's okay. I'll cut it because I know the path, by now. And I messed it up in the middle, and I couldn't recreate the middle, and I was like, how ironic. Here I am. And so I was just, I tried to fix it, I couldn't, and I ended up going to the person who helped me, who actually built the labyrinth for me. The World Labyrinth Society happens to be in my tiny village in upstate New York. Yes. And so I went, and I turn up on the doorstep of this man, and I said, I'm just disoriented. I'm weepy, and and I can't find the center of my labyrinth. and he's like, oh, that's perfect. It's beautiful. You know what your soul's doing. And I said, I know. And so he came over and he helped me recreate the center. And it was actually very interesting because really all I had to have done was to have mowed the whole thing, and I would have seen the pattern very easily because it was mowed, which is another really good analogy of just, going back down to the basics, cutting down what appears to be an obstruction was actually not. If I just mowed it, I would have seen it all. And so it's been a really challenging process over the last month of integrating those lessons. And I work with people who are transforming, and a lot of what people enjoy is the up, is the high of the journey, the high of the beauty, the walking, the companionship. But our lives are made up of circles and seasons, and people have as a culture, we have no patience with the dark. We have no patience with the still and the quiet. And it's what I've been going through the last month of just after this incredible growth on the Camino, of then the disorientation and the recalibration that feels it can feel painful and in a different way. And it was interesting when I came back, I was so surprised by it. I did not expect. I expected to kind of come home and life was all good And I went on the Camino, there's a forum, and I went on the forum. I was like, has anybody else ever felt like this? And I described how I was feeling. And people responded that it's very common. And they said, the solution for it is to plan your next trip, plan your next Camino. and my gut says no. My gut said I'd love to do the Camino, I'd love to, but it felt almost to me like bypassing. Like I'm really uncomfortable with what I'm feeling, so I'm just going to plan the next trip, and that will stop me from feeling.
Rather than being present to what actually is going on and really being with it.
Right. And to me, the closest word I have to tell people about what I'd been experiencing was grief. And I think it was because I touched this incredibly beautiful experience, parts of myself and community and connection with nature. And when I came back, I was grieving, missing that. And so looking at what is it that was so precious to me that it put me into a grieving process when I was physically absent from it, or when it's seemingly complete. So this idea of that beautiful quote about the journey and reaching the destination and realizing it's unfolding in the next journey. And since I've gotten back, it's been the next journey that's been unfolding. And it's the one that we talk about less, right? It's great to talk about, I just walked 500 miles, People don't go on the forum or generally talk about, missing the experience, or what it is that's so precious that we want to rebuild our lives around these things that we've touched and we've experienced. Like, I want my life to work around that now, or include that. And that means letting go of some of the things that, I've put in my life that I don't want there anymore.
So since you've been back, you've been making some big shifts in your life? Yeah,
well, looking at it, like, how do I do that? I just really miss walking 7 hours a day in nature. It's it's an incredibly beautiful, healing thing. And so just wanting to restructure my life so I can do that more often, and not just an hour or two, which I can do and have been doing.
Right.
And,
Wonderful. Okay, believe it or not, it's time for us to take our last commercial break of the hour. It flies by so fast. So when we come back, let's just talk about the integration process a little bit more, and kind of about, how this has affected your work with people. So everybody, please stay tuned. You're listening to the Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, and we'll be right back after these messages.